everybody. Lovely to see people in person, and hello on the Zoom screen. We just finished Rohatsu Sesshin, which is the sesshin that we celebrate every year at this time. It celebrates the Buddha's enlightenment. And we celebrate our own light and the potential to wake up to the light and the dark, the characteristic of our own life that is very complete, that is complete, where there's nothing missing, never has been missing, and there's nothing extra. We studied the Precious Mirror Samadhi chant, which I'll be talking about a little bit, and then I'm going to invite interaction about it, any questions or comments you have about it. Partly because I've given a number of talks this week so far, and I'm kind of done giving a talk, but I'm sure that I'll manage somewhat. So when we talk about samadhi, generally what happens is people worry that their experience falls far short. When we talk about samadhi and zazen, our experiences very often don't seem, that word does not compute with our experience. So you worry that you are falling short, which immediately gets the mind of comparing and judging going. So the thing about Zen is, and there are koans that tap this, that Zen both gives life and takes life. It gives life when we directly connect in our own experience with what is being referred to. And it takes life when we are misunderstanding what the words are about. So it takes a lot of working with these minds of ours directly. Meditation is a really important possibility for human beings. We call it meditation, and other species just do it. They just be present. But we're so distracted by layers and layers and layers of the conceptual that we often are really blind to what is. And this comes all the way around to this sense of having a self that is separate from everything else. So we miss the observation that actually everything arises together. We are not separate. But our awareness tends to gather a sense of locality. So samadhi is, we don't enter samadhi. Samadhi, the oneness of self and other, the disappearance of that separation, is always going on. The nature of all things is interdependently arising. And when we sit and we explore this possibility of samadhi, we realize our own samadhi. We are relieved of all of the suffering that comes from clinging to all of the forms of separation that we believe are true in a lasting and fixed way. So when I'm going to go through this and invite anybody who has a copy of it, so everybody here has a copy of it, some of you at home know this sutra. I just wanted to read through it kind of slowly, and usually when we're chanting it, we're going through it quickly. It's on page 22 in the chant books. So don't worry about understanding it. This is a poem. And when we read poetry, we don't necessarily read poems to understand them in the usual way. We come into full relation to the world that they are evoking. So the Dharma of thusness is intimately transmitted by Buddhas and ancestors. This is another word, thusness. What is that pointing to in your own experience? Suchness. Suchness is points to that, the direct. Now you have it, preserve it well. So immediately we are told that we have it, the Dharma of suchness, the experience of suchness. And we do all have it. What do you like to do? What's your favorite thing to do? Just call something out.
Horses. Horses.
Horses.
Horses. Yeah.
Music.
Very, very live. That's a really vivid, present. There's a real exchange going on there. There's no interruption between that exchange. That's a sense of thusness, when there is nothing lying between anything. There are no gaps in this field of the present moment. Now you have it, preserve it well. Respect this, pay attention, embody it. A silver bowl filled with snow, a heron hidden in the moon. So as we read that, a silver bowl filled with snow, doesn't that evoke almost a body experience when you come to that image? A silver bowl filled with snow. You feel the temperature, you can smell it, you touch it and it disappears. And a heron hidden in the moon, white on white. Taken as similar, they are not the same. Not distinguished, their places are known. The meaning does not reside in the words, but a pivotal moment brings it forth. The meanings that the sense of fulfillment and wholeheartedness, fullness and being met, meeting and being met by our experience, does not reside in any of the words we would say about it. It's the actual. The meaning does not reside in the words, but a pivotal moment brings it forth. So all of these words are wonderful koans. You can take a phrase, any of the phrases from this beautiful, the imagery is very dense, very condensed. This is an old poem. And so in the translated form, there's a lot of condensation of imagery. So you just take any phrase, any image, and live into it and see where it shows up in your own direct experience. Move and you are trapped. Miss and you fall into doubt and vacillation. Move and you are trapped. You know, we're always encouraging in Zazen to establish the posture, because you are expressing your awakened nature right here and now. And when you move, you're following an impulse to make something different, rather than being fully present with what is. So that's why part of the method of Zazen, in this Zen way, and you know, there are a lot of different approaches, but in Zen, we say, be absolutely still. Every time the body moves, the mind moves. When we are absolutely still, body and mind falls away. Meaning, there is no separation in this moment going on at all. It is limitless. Turning away and touching are both wrong, for it is like massive fire. Just to portray it in literary form is to stain it with defilement. Anything we say can mislead. Anything we say is limited to the word. It is not the direct experience. In darkest night, it is perfectly clear. Any of us who've been in sesshin and meditated for many hours every day can have direct access to the truth of this. Or if you wake in the night, and I'm taking dark literally here, if you wake in the night, there's nothing going on, but what is right immediately this, just this. We have, usually the mind has not started up yet. We don't have agendas. Unless we do. And we're chewing on a bone in the middle of the night and having a hard time of it, which also happens in the middle of the night. But sometimes we awaken and it's just only the sound of the rain. It is the standard for all things. Its use removes all suffering. All of you here and on the screen are here because you have connected with this particular way of lightening the load. At least it's lighter. We might not know what we want to say about it. We might not have had any particular experiences, and sometimes we do have some these lovely experiences, but that's not the point. So when we regularly come back to practicing just presence, it eases suffering. As long as we're trying to get away from some suffering form, if we're restless and we try to get away from it, we get even more restless. I know that one really well. I can attest to that. Restlessness is if we're torporous, if we're falling asleep, and we try not to, it just gets us even more. If we're filled with anger, and we try to stuff it and get away from it, it doesn't work. So turning toward removes all suffering. So you can try that out. You can experiment for yourself. Next time you're really having a hard time with something, don't try to make it go away. Really experience it in the body. In the body. In the way the narrative is showing up in your mind's ear, or the images that you're flashing in your mind's eye. Really, really appreciate how that difficulty is being formulated, and feel it. And as with everything, it changes. The experience changes. Experiences are energy states that are expressed in various ways in the musculature, in the mental formulations that we make, the narratives. And energy is always moving. It's always in flux, flow. So this is not constructed, but it is not beyond words. Well, that's a good one to ponder. Because we're saying the meaning does not reside in the words, and yet it's not beyond words. There is no exception to the empty nature of any phenomenon, including our words. Yet we strive to use words to help each other out, to bring about some effect. But they're not absolutes. if we regard words in this kind of a context as absolutes, what we've done is we've come up with a kind of fundamentalist position, which is the basis for a lot of fear and reactivity. You know what I mean? If we take everything very literally and say, this is the way it is to be done. So in Zen, we have everything that we do, all the forms are set out for us. But the idea in this is just to, I say this all the time, it's a choreography. It's a way to move through space as one, and to have everything settled already, so we don't have to be constantly thinking this or that. Should I do this? Should I do that? Which just brings up the small self and all of the trouble that comes along with the me as opposed to you. So the work, no matter how long we practice, the work is recognizing when we perch somewhere, when we nest into some particular state, some particular attitude or opinion or expectation or agenda. We have these, they can be useful, but the context for our life is so fluid. There are so many things influencing the way things actually go. So this is we get into the habit of relaxing into the moment just as it is. Well, I'm not going to keep going through the whole thing phrase by phrase, but I wanted to kind of get us started in this, and then ask if there's anything that comes to your mind, any question about it, or any insights you've had, or anything you'd like to bring forth for us to consider, to think about. Don't worry. Anything. There's not a good or a bad question. Yeah, Ellen.
I had an experience to share that, looking back on it, seems like it was Samadhi, or an experience of Samadhi. Happened a couple of years ago. I went to an opera, and this was not a live performance, but it was broadcast from New York City. So the quality was very fine. So I got lost in the music and the costumes and the story and the set. And the lights came on, and it was the end of the first act or something. And I thought it must be 5 minutes. I had no sense of time passing at all, and no awareness of myself in that. And I don't know if that counts as Samadhi or not.
Thank you. It points something out about this, which is that when we're using that word, one of the characteristic is a sense of the timeless. That time when we're in the ordinary round of things, we're very aware. Most of us are very aware of where we're at in the unfolding of the day, when the next appointment is, or when you have to get a certain thing done on your list, or whatever. There's always this the march of time, right? But when we are absorbed in that way, we're in the timeless. And sometimes it's just, there's nothing going on. Everything is emergent brilliantly. And it can be an opera performance, which is very lavish and impressive, or it can be something very simple. Anybody have an experience that's very, very simple, of absorption, getting very absorbed and kind of lost in?
It reminds me of this, I mean, it's not my personal experience, of this poem by Billy Collins, and it's really,
I can't quite
It reminds me of this poem by Billy Collins, and the whole poem is essentially about a bar of soap. And, you know, the soap just, it just gets so absorbed into, you know, the froth on the soap, and he just feels himself falling down again. So,
So I don't know.
I'm not giving it enough justice.
No, this is a lovely example though of the samadhi of ordinary mind. If you didn't hear, if you might not have been able to hear what's being said, I'm not sure how well the sound is coming across, but the comment was about a poem by Billy Collins about a bar of soap. And maybe you've had this experience of getting into the tub or the shower and getting really carried away by that bar of soap. That sensual experience, right? There's just no, and you're not thinking about it. You're just completely with the scent, the feel, the warmth, the whatever it is. Chase?
I think a lot of people have noticed that when you're in the shower, that's a good place for mindfulness because you're really free of distractions. There's no, headphones or anything, and it's just you and your own thoughts, and that's, and I think that might be a good time to just focus on the present moment because there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, you said you and your own thoughts. Well, thoughts can be, so you can be in the shower and you can be at work at the same time.
Yeah.
That is just an amazing capability that we have. Span the miles.
There's two experiences that come to mind that I'd like to share. One is I was a resident of a monastery in New York, and after my first full week of being on the schedule, and it was the weekend off, and I went to the gym to do yoga. My body was all sore from having been sitting for much longer than I was accustomed to. And I thought, well, I don't know how long I'm going to do this for. I'll just do what feels right. And I checked the clock, and 7 hours had gone by. And I thought I was just doing a little bit of stretching. And the other experience is I'm a massage therapist, and I've experienced that while giving a massage. This is not right here, and I'm just going to be with it, and then 20 minutes have gone by.
And yeah, there's the timeless. There's the complete falling away of any division. And it's just the timeless present moment, which sometimes occurs in zazen. You might have had that experience if you sit, and then all of a sudden the bell's ringing, and you think, "Oh, wait a minute." Yeah. And that's not if you've been lost in thought. But you've been really focused on the breath or sound or whatever it is that is the object of awareness is absorptive so that all separation disappears.
To me, one thing that's interesting is there's these experiences of being lost and being connected with something, and it doesn't happen all the time, or I wouldn't be able to function, right? So there's the experience of it, which in my life is pretty infrequent and not very long, but then it's really important for me to remember that. Even if I can't remember it in a really visceral sense, that I can remember that happened, and that's part of what everything is.
Yeah, that's pointing at the meaning of right recollection. Is remembering. It's part of the effect of having an experience, a specific experience, that is seems so different from the usual experience. Actually, over time, it is not so distinctly different. I mean, that's why this is a way of life. We do it for years, and it is not so separate, but the first time it happens, it's just so impressive. And then we can remember that. And that's kind of the basis, in a certain way, of faith. And faith in this practice is we know that for ourselves, we've tasted the possibility. And sometimes doesn't come from practice. You know, we can remember maybe early in our life a time when we had an experience, and this is the way the Buddha actually came up with his determination to sit until he was completely awake. He remembered when he was a child, and he was sat under the rose apple tree. The townspeople were all harvesting, and he sat there and he completely opened. I mean, a young child, and this is the life often of, I mean, I remember it from my very early years too, that so he was sitting there, and the life of all things were not separate from his life. And when I was a child, I sat in the garden. We had this garden which in my memory was huge, but I'm sure wasn't very big. But sitting there, I used to go out there and sit in the garden, and I would be among the plants and remember all of the variety of flying things. There were so many different forms of flying beings that were my friends. And, you know, kids very often will be that open that there's no time. I mean, kids aren't concerned about time. That's part of the oppression of school, is it brings time into a child's awareness. But anyway, Cassidy.
One of the, I think the nature of a mirror is that it will always reflect what you see without any discrimination. And it will always show, if you're a bird in front of a mirror, it shows a bird, or if I'm in front of the mirror, it shows me. And I think that's something beautiful about that. And I think Samadhi's like that too, where, you know, it's able to just, without any discrimination, show you something about the true nature of being.
Form and reflection behold each other. That's another one of the lines. Form and reflection behold each other. That's such a wonderful description because it's impossible to think about. I mean, thinking about it doesn't help at all for me. What about for you, Jack?
What I'm thinking about tends to be activities that I get involved in. If I'm rowing on the river, I mean, I like to raft. And I'll get into times where, I mean, not in big rapids or anything, because I have to be very focused. But there's times when I'm just rowing, and it just seems like, I don't know, it's just, you know, I'm there, I'm not really thinking about things. It's just like I'm absorbing everything around me. And I've had similar experiences on, I think, long-distance bike rides at times, and skiing. If you can just, you know, nowadays, I quit because there's thousands of people laying all over the slopes, but back in the old days when I could just go on down a mountain, I get times where it's just, I don't know, the zen of skiing or whatever.
Yeah.
It just flows, and
Yeah.
it takes very little concentration.
Ken, I don't know if people on Zoom can hear this. We're doing our best, but okay, you could hear, great. And you said not the rapids, but actually going down rapids is a great example, because if you are, there is nothing you can do but pay attention. you know, the life-threatening moments.
But I'm very aware of being scared shitless sometimes too, right? And it's like if I goof up, which I have, of course,
Uh-huh.
that there's big consequences, and so it's
Are
not
you
as
thinking?
peaceful, I guess.
Are you thinking, or is that just all of it together? I'm not talking about, see, Samadhi is not necessarily a peaceful, I mean, we're not talking about peaceful here. We're talking about fully present in whatever the state is. Samadhi is not a state in itself. It's pointing at something. It's pointing at wholeness, lack of separation. And when you're in the rapids and you're scared shitless, it's all part of the rapids. There's no difference between rapids and scared shitless. There's no separation. So that's kind of what we're, thanks for bringing that up, because it's really important not to think we're talking about bliss. Bliss is one part of it. Suffering is another part of it. All of the forms of suffering. And I think I was talking about that earlier, that, you know, when you're really having a hard time, the thing to do, if you have a Samadhi practice, is to turn toward it, be in it, really experience it. It is freeing. It's really freeing when you no longer are afraid of your own experiences. You're no longer afraid of death. You're no longer afraid of love. You're no longer afraid of vulnerability or of being seen or making a mistake, because you know how it feels and it's just what it is, right? So this is opening up this precious mirror that is our life. We are not an object. Our life is not an object. It is continually being formulated in this great, ever-present arising, the soup. Well, thank you so much for exchanges. Is there anything that maybe one person on the screen? You're way back there. I can't quite see you, but anything that anybody else wants to say before we move on to our next? Okay.
Please rise and stand behind your cushion, the 3 bows.